It's stretching a different muscle, and I'd like to think that I, have adapted to it. But I love it. I think it's very exciting when you get laughs on something that isn't dirty. It's because it means it's a genuinely funny thing.
All right, so that was Patrick Walsh talking about his personal take on clean versus dirty comedy. Any thoughts about what he had to say there? With the clean versus dirty. I mean, now I'm just starting to get into stand-up comedy, and one thing that I noticed since I was a kid is there is something timeless about somebody who can do comedy, do stories that are not about the dirty. Like Peter Walsh was saying, it's much more refreshing and much more satisfying, and it has a longevity to it. And the thing is, I've always disliked about stand-up comedians is they always went for the hot button topic, the politics of the time, or I must talk about something really controversial just to get an audience and try to milk that sort of stuff and not really have a lot of substance. So it sounds like our fears might be abated, Michael. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, comedy, it can be shocking, and sometimes it should be.
Yeah.
But it should never be just shocking.
Right.
It needs to be there needs to be a consciousness to it, and if you approach it consciously, then that's the ground to build off of at that point. And as someone, like he said, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's sometimes it was a raunchy show, but it was a smart show too, and it was a genuinely very funny show sometimes as well. And I think with comedy, it's all about what is the thought process behind the joke, and if it's thought out, then sometimes it's shocking, sometimes it isn't.
Sure. Yeah, it's because sometimes reality just is crazy. And so I got one last clip where Patrick talks about clean versus dirty trends in comedy as a whole. And
I certainly think there's room for both, but I think most sitcoms certainly the driving force is sex jokes usually, or risque jokes. And in terms of, is it turning around? I haven't seen it, but I know that some of the shows that get a lot of praise for being stuff you can watch with your family about serious issues, like the One Day at a Time reboot. I haven't seen it, but people really love that show. And, I think certainly there's a need for people to have a show they can watch with their families. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to get so frustrated. I'd sit down to watch Saturday Night Live with my dad, and 2 minutes in, I would get sent to bed because they said something I couldn't see. It was the same with The Simpsons or anything else. There'd be a joke that went too far, and I'd be sent out of the room. And I hope that this show is not only a show that families can watch together, but one that will lead to some good discussions. I do think America is kind of starved for that, and I do think there's a place for both, absolutely.
And so you guys have any thoughts about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was noticing is that I'm older than Peter. So Patrick. I'm Patrick. Good. Oh, I'm so old. I don't remember the name.
I thought that was a bibiblical reference.
Yeah.
You look good.
Let's not talk dirty jokes with Patrick and Walsh and all that stuff. But when I was a kid, we were watching Carol Burnett show. We were watching those things, and those things don't exist for us anymore as as families. Us being families, and he's right. It doesn't in what his experience was. The Simpsons and the Saturday Night Live, although Saturday Night Live was around then too. But the thing is that those shows don't exist where kids and the parents can both enjoy it, even on different levels, every 7 p.m. after dinner. That's just kind of like it. That's gone, and it should be coming back. Somebody needs to capitalize on that.
Well, then I believe Patrick is.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the fact that it doesn't really exist right now, it doesn't mean that it can't. And I mean, the Carol Burnett show is a shining example of that. I mean, I even I as a 30-year-old who wasn't even close to being born yet when that show was on, I love going back and looking at clips of that show because funny is funny, and funny will always last.
All right. Well, hey, let's move on to another kind of funny.
This week, I believe, Chris Rock came out with a new special on Netflix, and you checked it out, huh, Michael?
I did, yeah. Not only did I see the final cut on Netflix, but also last November, I was able to see Chris Rock at the Dolby Theater.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
so he did, it was kind of an extended version of what eventually became the Tambourine special. But yeah, I loved it. I'm a huge Chris Rock fan. Both his stand-up and many of his movies, actually. Top 5 a couple years ago, I thought were extremely underrated.
You got a poster of it.
I see that. Yeah, that's it. Carl's got a great poster selection in his room here.
The luxurious studios.
But this is saying a lot because Chris Rock he's one of the all-time great stand-ups, and he set such a high standard for himself. I thought this was his best special yet. And the reason I think that is because he's always had that signature one-of-a-kind ability to hold society's feet up to the coals. But in Tambourine, he not only held society up to the coals, he also held a mirror up to himself and very humbly explored, here are ways that I can be better as a man. Because he, if you don't know, he and his wife of 15 years or so had a divorce. And he discussed that quite a little bit. He was very vulnerable at the end of his special discussing that and where he thinks he went wrong. And actually, the special is called Tambourine. This was my favorite line from the special, and I think it must have been his too, hence the title. But he said that where he went wrong with his marriage is that with a marriage, her success is your success, and your success is her success. And he said that I lost track of the fact that when a marriage is it's like a musical performance. Some nights you're Mick Jagger, and some nights you're playing the tambourine, and no one wants to see an angry tambourine player. You just need to play that tambourine with all your heart when it's your turn to play it, which I thought was A, hilarious, and B, a really interesting way of putting it that I really kind of connected with.
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of his. He's my probably my favorite comic, even though I'm a stand-up. I forgot to mention that. And actually should point out that one thing about this show, I think that the survey we mentioned earlier really speaks to me in that I'm involved in, like you, Catholic media with working with the Angelus and trying to address pop culture and for all ages. But I think that if the church wants to thrive again with young people, we need to be pointing out that which is good in the culture and turning people that way and not acting like we're completely above and out of it. And I think that, so I'd like to say that with Chris Rock, I think that, some people might dismiss him among the religious audience because, he swears a lot or whatever. But the thing is, as you're pointing out here, I think he always has a strong sense of social commentary, social justice, and not just in a party line kind of a way. He's very unpredictable. From the first time I ever saw him was his first special in '96, Bring the Pain. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend that to anybody that can handle foul language, of course, but it's just comes out of the gate just addressing just countless things that go on and how we see black and white America and the way that race affects society. And it was probably even more powerful now than it was then. And he took heat because he pointed out divisions in the black community. He used the N-word a lot and called certain parts of the community that versus black people as another faction. And you could have the same debate about, the white community saying, so-called white trash versus the elite or middle class or whatever. And I think he's always had this interesting take that's very daring, and he says a lot of things that people think but don't ever have the guts to say directly, I think. And I want to give a prime example. We can touch back on a little more broadly about him or on the special too, but there was a clip from one of his shows. I believe somebody told me it was Kill the Messenger, which I think was 2008. And he talks about abortion in the U.S., and he caught a lot of flack from the pro-choice crowd for part of his commentary about abortion.
Oh, the abortion issue, man. It's a woman's issue. A woman get pregnant, she don't want to hear from the man. you. I don't need you. Mother you. Unless she decides to have the baby, then she's like, where's my check? That's right. When a woman gets pregnant, it's a choice between the woman and her girlfriends. A woman get pregnant, her and her girlfriends get together, and they have a little abortion tribunal, and they vote on the baby like it's survivor. And each girlfriend puts in her 2 cents. And one girlfriend goes, child, you should have that baby. That man got some good hair. It's wavy. It's wavy. And the other girlfriend goes, child, why are we even talking about this? Ain't we supposed to go to Cancun next week? Get rid of that baby. And that's how life is decided in America.
Yeah, that was a pretty harsh take on the issue, and surely, you know, while we're being Catholic or on the anti-abortion side of these things, then the thing is that you know, it's all we do acknowledge this is a tough situation for any woman to be in, but Chris is speaking about what surely probably is a portion of what goes on out there, you know, where it isn't always just the scariest situation you're facing. That we've tended to become a society where some of these decisions are matter of convenience or something, you know, certainly not all, but some. But more, I don't really want to get into the abortion debate here so much, unless you have a thought about that specifically as well. But
well, yeah, I mean, like
him.
that's why he's such a master, because he, you know, he toes the line so well, and he knows exactly where he can take his toes to, because he's put his unique thought into it, and he's earned it. And yes, it is shocking, but as I was saying earlier with living biblically, what I hope for living biblically, it's never just shocking. It's shocking, but also really smartly thought out. And for me, comedy is that it's very best and can be so powerful when you say to yourself, I'm laughing at this because I recognize it as true, and I'm uncomfortable with that, and I'm uncomfortable with that in myself. That's when comedy is such a challenging and beautiful art form. And that's why he's one of the greats. I agree with you. He's right up there with my favorites.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, I think that basically the most pertinent thing about this across the board is the fact that, like I said, he speaks to things that people are afraid to say otherwise. And to be completely honest with people, right before that clip, he is saying, "Oh, you know, okay, so abortion's legal. That's great." You know, and I don't know. I think he's couching it to soften the blow leading into the bigger point here. But just saying, if he goes look for this footage, yes, he does. He kind of walks the other side of the fence a little bit as well in that general topic. But he also touched on abortion in another special where he raises a kind of an interesting point, but I'm not going to pull the clip on it, where he says, you know, if a woman asks you, that usually men are left out of the decision, but if a woman asks a man, what should she do? And the man says, well, just abort it. Then the guy really needs to think about this long and hard, because if she decides to have the kid, that kid's going to find out someday that you wanted it dead, and how mad it'll be and all this. But, you know, and it's like, it's an outrageous way of looking at it, but, you know, but it does, under the surface, I think it's very interesting. He he's addressing indirectly that he sees this as a life. Let's call it a life, but the choice is: are you going to try and deal with it ongoing, or take this other route, rather than just saying that isn't even a life at all, which a lot of comics would just scoff and take that route dismissively, I think.
And that's another thing that's so great about him is, like you said, yes, he has become kind of a voice of specifically black culture and the ills that society has when it comes to black and white relationships in society. But it's never limited just to that. He talks about abortion. He talks about the government. He talks about all different kind of issues, and he's able to do it in a way where it all kind of comes back to this unique thesis statement that it's all the same problem. It all stems back from